Ladies and gentlemen, there's a quiet strength in smart women, women who walk through this world not just with intelligence, but with soul. These women don't always speak the loudest, but they live with a rare kind of wisdom, the wisdom to embrace hard truths, and not just embrace them, but carry them like armor, walk with them like maps. These truths are not easy, but they are essential. And today, I want to share 6 of them. These are not just thoughts to ponder. They're truths to live by. And the women who remember them are the ones who stay grounded in chaos, courageous in fear, and deeply rooted in their own worth. It begins with a simple, often painful realization: you are not here to be liked by everyone. For many women, especially those raised to be agreeable, accommodating, and pleasing, this truth hits hard. We are taught from a young age that likability is currency. Smile more. Don't speak too loudly. Be pleasant, be soft, be digestible. But the moment a woman starts living from her truth instead of her performance, the audience shifts. Some will cheer her on. Others will become uncomfortable. And the smart woman knows this discomfort isn't her fault. It's her freedom showing. A woman who is truly in alignment with herself will eventually disrupt the expectations of others. She will stop conforming to outdated roles that were never meant for her in the first place. She will stop agreeing just to keep the peace. She will stop sacrificing her voice in the name of harmony. And when she does, she will lose some people. But what she gains is infinitely more valuable: her self-respect. Smart women understand that being liked by everyone often requires betraying parts of themselves. And they're no longer willing to pay that price. This doesn't mean that smart women are rude, unkind, or abrasive. Quite the opposite. It means they are rooted, grounded, aligned. It means they are no longer available for the emotional labor of constantly managing how others perceive them. And once they release that weight, the weight of performing for approval, they step into something unshakable, a quiet confidence, a peace that doesn't rely on external validation, a self-worth that isn't tied to applause. Smart women don't aim to offend, but they're also not afraid of what happens when their truth does. The truth is, the more authentic a woman becomes, the more she will reflect the inauthenticity in others. And not everyone is ready to face that mirror. Some will push back, criticize, or even gossip behind her back. But smart women know this resistance isn't about them. It's about the discomfort truth brings to people who are still hiding from their own. When a woman stops dimming her light, she exposes the places others have kept in shadow. And often, people mistake this exposure for arrogance or defiance. In reality, it's courage. There comes a moment when a smart woman realizes that the fear of being disliked has held her hostage. It has kept her small, silent, and stifled. And she decides once and for all that being free is more important than being liked. That standing in her truth is more rewarding than standing in someone else's expectations. From this place, she stops editing herself. She no longer feels the need to justify her choices, explain her boundaries, or apologize for her strength. She lets go of the people who only loved her when she was easy to manage. And here's the most powerful part. When a woman finally makes peace with being misunderstood, she becomes unstoppable. She trusts her voice, her pace, her instincts. She realizes that the people meant for her won't need her to shrink. They'll celebrate her fullness. They'll respect her no, honor her yes, and value her presence. But none of that happens until she faces the hard truth. Not everyone will like you. And that's a sign you're doing something right. Because the goal isn't to be liked, It's to be real. One of the hardest truths that smart women come to accept is this: no matter how much you love someone, support someone, or believe in their potential, you cannot save them from themselves. You can pour your heart into someone. You can show them what's possible, speak life into them, offer grace, second chances, and even pieces of yourself. But if they are not ready to change, if they are not willing to see the damage, do the healing, your efforts will be like trying to water a plant with no roots. Empty, exhausting, unsustainable. This is especially hard for women with big hearts. Women who are nurturers by nature, women who see the hurt behind harsh words, the fear behind avoidance, the vulnerability behind anger. Smart women feel deeply, but they learn, sometimes through heartbreak, that empathy does not mean rescue. There is a fine line between compassion and self-neglect. A woman can be kind, supportive, and even loving without becoming someone else's emotional life raft. She can care deeply and still choose herself when it becomes clear the other person has no intention of doing the work. There's a reason this truth is so painful. It's rooted in powerlessness. Watching someone you care about spiral, self-sabotage, or reject accountability can break your heart. But smart women begin to understand their love is not a rehabilitation center. Their boundaries are not up for negotiation. And no matter how badly they want someone to heal, the process must be chosen, not forced. Wanting it for them isn't enough. Believing in them isn't enough. At some point, the person has to want it for themselves, and until they do, your love will not transform them. It will only drain you. Many women get caught in the loop of overgiving. They stay too long in relationships with partners, friends, or even in family members who consistently refuse to grow. They rationalize the emotional labor. If I just hold on a little longer, maybe they'll change. If I love them unconditionally, they'll see their worth. If I'm patient enough, they'll meet me where I am. But here's the raw truth. Sometimes love is not a bridge. Sometimes love is a mirror, and people will turn away because they cannot bear to see themselves clearly. Smart women learn to tell the difference between someone who is struggling and someone who is committed to staying stuck. They learn to recognize the patterns, promises made and broken, moments of hope followed by backsliding, apologies with no changed behavior. They begin to see that staying isn't always noble. Sometimes it's self-abandonment in disguise. And the cost of staying too long in someone else's story is that you slowly start losing your own. Smart women reclaim their time, energy, and identity when they realize they are not the solution to another person's chaos. What happens next is powerful. The smart woman detaches, not out of bitterness or anger, but out of wisdom. She steps back not because she doesn't care, but because she finally understands her caring is not creating change. She no longer ties her worth to someone else's progress. She no longer needs to be the hero, the fixer, or the emotional anchor. She releases the illusion of control and lets people take full responsibility for their lives. And in doing so, she gets her life back. Her peace returns, her strength deepens. Letting go of the urge to fix others isn't cold. It's clear. It's loving someone enough to say, I believe in your healing, but I can't carry it for you. It's trusting that people have their own timing, their own lessons, and their own paths. Smart women stop rescuing because they finally realize saving someone is not the same as loving them. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step away. For a long time, many women are taught that loneliness is the worst thing that can happen to them. That being alone means being unwanted, unloved, or somehow incomplete. So they stay. They stay in half-hearted relationships. They stay in toxic friendships. They stay in rooms where their presence is tolerated, not celebrated. And all the while, something deep inside begins to fracture, not all at once, but slowly, subtly. That fracture is the betrayal of self. And one day, the smart woman finally wakes up and realizes being alone is nowhere near as painful as being betrayed by someone I trusted. Betrayal doesn't always come wrapped in dramatic lies or grand acts of infidelity. Sometimes betrayal shows up in tiny ways. Someone who consistently ignores your needs, a friend who jokes about your insecurities, a partner who chips away at your confidence with passive comments, a family member who refuses to respect your boundaries. These small betrayals add up and they leave scars. They make you doubt yourself, question your worth. But the smart woman begins to recognize that silence in the face of betrayal is not strength, it's self-abandonment. What makes betrayal so excruciating isn't just the act itself, it's the breaking of a sacred contract. You trusted this person. You let them in. You believed they would protect your vulnerability, not weaponize it. And when they do the very thing you never thought they'd do, the hurt becomes personal. That sting stays in the body, in the nervous system, long after the moment passes. Smart women learn that trust is not just something you give, it's something you watch. And when someone repeatedly shows you who they are, it's not cruel to believe them. It's necessary. The turning point comes when a woman sits with herself, truly sits in the silence, in the grief, in the discomfort of solitude, and finds that it doesn't break her. In fact, it begins to rebuild her. Alone, she hears her own thoughts clearly again. She reconnects to her own rhythm. She doesn't need to perform or shrink or pretend. And that stillness, which once felt terrifying, becomes sacred. She realizes her peace is not a weakness. It's power. It's clarity. It's healing. Being alone for the smart woman becomes a sanctuary instead of a sentence. What shifts next is profound. Her standards rise. She no longer sees her solitude as something to escape from, but as something to protect. She becomes unwilling to allow just anyone into her space. She begins to ask different questions. Does this person nourish me? Do I feel emotionally safe with them? Can I be my full self here? Or must I fragment to be accepted? Smart women don't settle for crumbs once they've tasted the wholeness of their own company. They know the cost of betrayal, and they're no longer willing to gamble with their well-being. When a woman reaches this level of self-respect, she becomes a different kind of powerful. She does not tolerate emotional inconsistency. She does not chase closure or beg for explanation. She does not stay where she is not valued. Instead, she chooses the harder, quieter path, walking away. And she does so not with bitterness, but with wisdom, because now she knows peace is not found in proximity to another person. It's found in the alignment of her own soul. She chooses herself fully and without apology, not because she's cold, but because she's finally warmed to herself. This isn't to say that smart women don't desire connection. They do, deeply. But they know the difference between connection and attachment, between love and dependency. They no longer confuse presence with loyalty, and they certainly don't confuse attention with respect. They want real, grounded intimacy built on trust, mutuality, and emotional safety. Until that shows up, they are not afraid to stand alone, because the smart woman has made peace with a painful truth that sets her free. Being alone is far better than being betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect you. There comes a point in a woman's life when she stops performing and starts protecting her time, her energy, her inner world. She learns that not every battle deserves her reaction, not every insult deserves her engagement, and not every storm requires her presence. That moment, when she begins to choose her peace over pleasing others, is the moment her life quietly transforms. But what many women don't expect is how deeply threatening that peace can feel to people who have never known how to function without drama. Peace, when embodied, is powerful. It is presence. It is the kind of stillness that no longer feels the need to defend, explain, or chase understanding. It is the deep exhale of someone who no longer lives in survival mode. But here's the truth most women learn the hard way. The more peace you cultivate, the more uncomfortable you make those who are addicted to dysfunction. Smart women start to notice that when they stop over-explaining and start setting boundaries, certain people begin to push harder, not pull away. That's not love resisting change. It's control resisting loss. The woman who used to walk on eggshells is now walking with purpose. The one who used to say yes out of guilt now says no from her core. Her peace isn't passive, it's assertive. It doesn't scream, it doesn't demand, it just is. And in a world where chaos has become a communication style, peace becomes disruptive. It exposes things. It exposes the noise, the dysfunction, the codependency. It's unsettling to those who rely on emotional confusion to avoid looking at themselves. So they push, they provoke, they accuse you of changing as if evolution is a betrayal. Smart women begin to understand that protecting their peace will cost them relationships, but never the right ones. They stop being baited by guilt trips, silent treatments, or emotional games. They realize that if someone feels abandoned by your boundaries, it's likely because they were benefiting from your lack of them. The peace they fought so hard to build becomes sacred. They no longer entertain unnecessary conflict just to keep connections intact, because the cost of re-entering chaos for the sake of comfort is simply too high. But peace doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean you never feel anger, sadness, or fear. It means you no longer live at the mercy of those emotions or other people's. You begin to notice the patterns. You recognize when someone is trying to pull you back into an old version of yourself. The one who over-apologized, the one who was afraid to be misunderstood, the one who tolerated emotional inconsistency in the name of loyalty, and you choose not to go back. That is peace. That is power. And not everyone will celebrate it. The hard part is that this shift can feel lonely at first because you're no longer engaging the way you once did. You're not responding to every provocation, not showing up to every emotional fire. And some people will take your silence as punishment when really it's protection for both of you. But as time passes, something beautiful happens. Your peace becomes your filter. The people who remain in your life are those who respect your energy, your calm, your evolution. You realize that the relationships that survive your healing are the ones worth keeping. Smart women don't aim to be unbothered, they aim to be grounded. And when they get there, when they learn how to self-regulate, how to say, I'll get back to you, instead of reacting impulsively, how to breathe instead of break, some people will fall away. Let them. Because the ones who need chaos to feel seen will always see your peace as rejection. But the ones who have done the work will see it as an invitation to grow, to ground, to rise. We talk about growth like it's a sunrise, bright, clean, beautiful. But that's only part of the truth. Real growth doesn't always look like blossoming. Sometimes it looks like breaking. Sometimes it feels like letting go of everything you thought you needed. People, identities, routines, stories you've clung to for years. Growth isn't just about what you're stepping into. It's also about what you're willing to release. And smart women learn through tears, grief, and quiet courage that growth often hurts because it requires us to leave behind what once felt like home. The truth is, there's a cost to evolving. You don't get to keep everything. You can't keep the people who only loved the version of you that didn't know how to say no. You can't keep the habits that helped you cope when you didn't yet know how to heal. You can't keep the old comfort zones and simultaneously stretch into new territory. Growth is not an addition. It's a trade. For every layer you shed, you gain depth. For every goodbye you whisper to the old version of yourself, you gain clarity. And yet, that doesn't mean it doesn't ache. Smart women understand that this ache isn't a sign of doing it wrong. It's the very evidence that they're doing it right. The sadness you feel when outgrowing friendships is real. The disorientation you feel when your old passions no longer fuel you, also real. The guilt that surfaces when you finally prioritize your own needs after a lifetime of people pleasing. That's part of the process. Growth isn't clean. It's messy. It stirs up all the things you've buried under fine and I'm okay. It demands honesty. It demands grief. And it demands that you learn how to sit with discomfort without rushing to fix it. There's a kind of mourning that comes with becoming. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. You wake up one day and realize you no longer fit into certain conversations. Certain spaces no longer feel like they align with your values. You try to reconnect with people from your past and find that you have nothing left to say. There's a wordless sadness in that realization, a loneliness. But smart women don't run from that emptiness. They allow it. They sit with it. They honor it, not because they're emotionally numb, but because they've learned that grief is a natural part of growth. Letting go can feel like betrayal, especially when you're choosing yourself in spaces where you were taught to sacrifice. But what you're actually doing is realigning. You're choosing integrity over identity. You're saying, this no longer feels like truth to me. I love who I was, but I'm no longer her. That takes extraordinary courage because it means you'll sometimes feel misunderstood. You'll miss people who don't exist anymore. You'll question yourself. But growth for smart women is not about certainty. It's about trust. Trusting that the version of you you're becoming deserves a life that matches her evolution. Eventually, something shifts. The sadness softens. The loneliness begins to feel more like solitude. The grief makes space for grace. And you realize that what you thought was lost was really a return to yourself, to your power, to your voice. Growth stripped away everything that wasn't you so you could finally come home to the woman you were always meant to be. And no, it wasn't easy, but it was necessary, and smart women carry this wisdom with them. Just because something is painful doesn't mean it's wrong. Sometimes the most painful chapters are the ones that set you free. There's a deep, instinctive desire in most of us to belong, to be accepted, to be chosen. From early on, we're taught to soften our edges, to round our truth, to contort ourselves in order to fit neatly into the mold of someone else's expectations. Be agreeable, be nice, be easy to love. And for many women, that performance becomes so habitual, so automatic that they begin to mistake it for identity. But one day, the smart woman wakes up to a profound, liberating truth. She is not for everyone. And that is her power, not her flaw. This truth doesn't arrive gently. It often comes on the heels of rejection, of being left out, of being gossiped about for being too much or too intense. or too different. It stings. It shakes your confidence. It makes you question whether who you are is somehow wrong. But smart women learn that when people recoil from their realness, it's not a sign to retreat. It's a sign to rise, because what they're rejecting isn't you. It's the part of you that refuses to perform anymore. The part of you that finally decided to be whole instead of palatable. Being misunderstood is part of the price of authenticity. When a woman stops deluding herself, stops editing her emotions to make others comfortable, and stops agreeing just to keep the peace, she will inevitably trigger something in others. Her confidence will be mistaken for arrogance. Her boundaries will be labeled as coldness. Her standards will be called unreasonable. And for a while, that misinterpretation hurts. But then something sacred begins to take root: self-trust. The smart woman learns to trust her own voice more than the crowd's noise. And in that trust, she begins to redefine what it means to be too much. Too honest? No. She just refuses to lie to make people feel better. Too emotional? No. She's done gaslighting her own feelings. Too ambitious? No. She's finally claiming space she was always worthy of. She learns that shrinking for the comfort of others is no longer a strategy she's willing to use. Because the truth is, she was never too much. She was just in the wrong room. And the moment she stops twisting herself into knots for the sake of approval, she begins to attract what's real. What's real doesn't flinch at depth. It doesn't feel threatened by her standards. It doesn't require her to break herself into digestible pieces. It meets her where she is, whole, messy, evolving. And until those people arrive, the smart woman is not afraid to walk alone. She doesn't fear solitude the way she once did, because she knows the cost of compromising her integrity just to feel momentarily included. Her energy becomes selective, not from pride, but from wisdom. Not everyone deserves access to the parts of her she fought so hard to reclaim. There is quiet power in no longer needing to be liked, in no longer auditioning for affection or shrinking for survival. Smart women wear their uniqueness like armor. They do not apologize for the way their minds work, for the truth they speak, or for the light they carry. And they no longer beg to be understood. Because the older, wiser version of themselves knows being misunderstood is a sign you are finally living in alignment, not in agreement. You are not for everyone. And that is the very thing that makes you unforgettable. These truths aren't soft. They're not easy, but they are sacred. And the smart woman doesn't just memorize them, she embodies them. She knows that being disliked isn't failure, that fixing others isn't love, that loneliness is sometimes the beginning of real connection with herself. She protects her peace like a treasure, not because it makes life perfect, but because it makes her whole. She accepts that growth will break her before it builds her. And she walks boldly in the knowledge that her power lies in not being for everyone, because the woman who carries these truths walks differently. She moves with clarity. She speaks with conviction. She no longer dances for crumbs of validation. She no longer lives to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding her. She doesn't shrink, apologize, or ask for permission. She remembers who she is every time the world tries to make her forget. And that remembrance, that quiet revolution inside her, that's what makes her truly unstoppable. So here's to the woman who remembers these hard truths. The woman who chooses depth over approval, alignment over acceptance, and authenticity over applause. She may not be for everyone, but she's always enough for herself. And that, right there, is everything.